Okay, so it's an interesting program we're going to do this week and the next few weeks on the Bible stories for grown-ups. As we're young, we learn all these wonderful stories from Bereshit about Adam and Eve, and about Noah, and about Cain and Abel, and Abraham and Isaac, etc., etc. And they all have good moral lessons. But as we grow older and we look at the text more carefully, we wonder what the ultimate meaning is. So I'm going to guess at some of the meanings today, and we'll try our best to understand the story of Adam and Eve today. But I don't claim to have the answer. I claim to have some answers, some questions more than answers. And you are all welcome to share your thoughts, questions, comments, thoughts. And you could please email me at mdangel@jewishideas.org. I always answer emails. So if you have any thoughts about what we're saying, or you have any additions, subtractions, etc., please mdangel@jewishideas.org. Okay, so we learned the story of Adam and Eve, and we learned the story that God had these two trees planted in the Garden of Eden, and one was the tree of life and one was the tree of good and evil. And lo and behold, God told Adam, don't eat from the tree of evil, good and evil, because if you eat from that tree, you're going to die. And what, of course, happens? Eve eats from it and gives it to Adam, and they're banished from the Garden of Eden. So the basic story as it's taught is the failure of humanity. Here's human beings were given everything. They had the Garden of Eden, perfect situation. God gave them all that they wanted. And what do? They blew it. They ate just one fruit they couldn't eat. They ate it. They couldn't help themselves. They sinned and they were punished. That's how the story is told. I don't believe that story is correct. At least the story is correct, but the way I just told it isn't the real message of the story. It's an entirely different message. I want to just go back to us. Let's say we have children. We had children. And I'll tell you a story, personal story. My son Chaim, who in those days was called Jeffrey. So he's 2 years old and he's in a crib. So I tell him, Jeffrey, I'll call him Chaim now. I don't want you to climb out of that crib, because if you climb out of that crib, you're going to fall down and get hurt. And then I go to the other room, and 10 minutes later, Jeffrey comes into the room. He climbed out of the crib and he came. Am I angry at him or not angry at him? Well, I'm angry. I told him to stay in the crib. It's dangerous to get out of the crib. But really, I'm really proud of him. Wow, he did it. I expect at some point he's going to be strong enough and old enough to climb out of that crib. He's not going to stay in the crib forever. And I give God credit. God, according to our understanding, is very wise. So when God created Adam and Eve, he knew darn well ahead of time that they're going to eat from that tree. And not only did he know that they're going to eat from the tree, he knew that they had to eat from the tree. That's part of the growing up process. Just as we know our child is going to climb out of the crib, we know very well that Adam and Eve are going to eat from that tree. They're told, all you have to do to make sure the kid's going to do something, tell them, don't do it. Then you know they're going to do it, for sure. So that I want to go through the verses carefully and see what the verses mean based on this interpretation. So if you have the book, the Genesis in front of you, that's terrific. We're going to go from Genesis chapter 2, verse 8. If you don't need to. I'm going to read it anyway. The Lord God formed Adam from the dust of the earth. He blew into his nostrils the breath of life and made man into a living being. Nefesh Chaya. What is Nefesh Chaya? A living being. What kind of being? Now let's think about that a moment. There are all kinds of beings. Let's just imagine for a moment that we're talking about a caveman. We're talking about a caveman before having human psychology, before having a sense of guilt, before having a sense of consciousness. Let's imagine a cow. A cow is grazing in the field. The cow eats grass. The cow doesn't have any moral concept. The cow doesn't have any notion it's going to die. It's a cow. It eats grass. It survives. God created Adam, this first being, as a nefesh chaya, as a living being. But the Torah is very careful not to tell us what kind of living being. But then it goes further. The Lord God planted a garden in Eden in the east and placed there the man whom he had formed. So God obviously had some plan here. He created this being, and he put this being in a wonderful garden where everything was available for the person to eat. The person didn't have to build a shelter. The person didn't have to make any clothing. The person didn't have to cultivate the soil. The person had everything ready-made, just like, quotation marks, a cow or a gorilla or a caveman. Caveman's a little bit different, as we'll come to in a moment. Now skip down to verse 15. The Lord God took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to till it and to tend it. That means God knew that this being has some capacities. It's not just a cow. This being has the ability to till and tend it. It means there's some responsibility given. So we're already talking about a being that has some degree of intelligence, some degree of responsibility, but we're not sure exactly how sophisticated this being is. And then God gives a commandment. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you are free to eat, but as for the tree of knowledge of good and bad or good and evil, you must not eat it. For as soon as you eat it, you shall die. First of all, if God gave Adam a commandment, it means the being was capable of receiving a commandment. So it's not just a cow or a gorilla. There's already consciousness that this person has the ability to decide yes or no. Otherwise, God couldn't give the commandment. But now, why tempt him? If God's creating this beautiful being, why did God put those trees there in the first place? Why tempt the person? And moreover, it says on the day that you eat from it, you'll die. Adam was just created, according to the Torah. What does he know what death is? He didn't die. He doesn't. There's no history before him of people dying. So what kind of threat is it? And second of all, when he ate from the tree, did he die? He didn't die. So we have to figure out what's the Torah telling us here. God specifically is telling Adam, on the day that you eat from this, you're going to die. And he didn't die. Okay. So go down to verse 21. God sees that Adam is alone. And what does he do? So the Lord God cast a deep sleep upon the man. And while he slept, he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh at that spot. And the Lord God fashioned the rib that he had taken from a man into a woman, and he brought her to the man. And the man said, this one at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This one shall be called Isha, woman. Why? Because she was taken from Ish, she was taken from a man. So now we have Ish and Isha, male and female, both tied together. How do they define each other? They're co-partners in this Garden of Eden. If you remember, when God gave the commandment not to eat from the tree of knowledge, who did he give the commandment to? Only to Adam. Eve was not there, according to the chronology of the story. All right, let's keep that in mind. Then it says, the two of them were naked, the man and his wife, yet they felt no shame. Why does the Torah tell us that? Why do we have to know that? And if you look at the Hebrew word, it says, Vayushneim arumim. They were both naked. And the next sentence is going to be about the snake, and the snake is called Arum. Arum means sly. The servant was sly. And the Torah doesn't just use this play on words as a joke, it's serious. In other words, this man and woman that were created are naked, meaning they're innocent beings. They have no concept of shame. They walk around like cows or gorillas. The cows and gorillas don't put on clothes. They just walk around, they graze. These were cave people, so to speak. They were people that they had no awareness of shame. Arumim means they were naive, they were simple. And by contrast, the snake is called, the next sentence, verse chapter 3, the Anachash haya arum. The serpent was the shrewdest of all wild beasts. So why did God create the serpent? If he didn't want the people to fail, why create this temptation and this tempter? The answer is God is very smart. And God knows in the course of human life, there are going to be people, whether they're serpents or not in real form, that are going to tempt us, no matter what we do. The Bible uses mythological language, serpent, but it could be anything. People are always tempting us. Situations are tempting us. We're all going to face temptation. So we have these arumim, these innocent, naive man and woman who are so naive that they don't even realize they're naked. And you have this shrewd snake who's going to outsmart them. So what does the serpent say? He said to the woman, why did he go to the woman? The answer is, obviously, because the woman didn't hear the commandment directly. The woman didn't hear that commandment. Adam heard it. Adam must have told it to her. And the snake, being very shrewd, is also an eavesdropper. So he must have listened in and heard the conversation when Adam told Chava, we can't eat from that tree. So he said, oh, there's the weak link. She hasn't heard it directly. Let me see what I can do. Did God really say you shall not eat any tree of the garden? They're very shrewd. He knows darn well, if he overheard the conversation, that they're allowed to eat any fruit that they want. Only one tree they can't. But this being shrewd, he strudels her a little bit. You're not allowed to eat any tree, any fruit. The woman said, oh no, we may eat of the fruit of other trees of the garden. Only about the fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden, God said, you shall not eat of it or touch it, lest you die. What did Eve say that wasn't in the original commandment? And you should not eat it or touch it. God never said you can't touch it. God never said it anywhere, you can't touch that tree, only you can't eat from the tree. So the Midrash already explains that it must be that when Adam told Eve the commandment, he added that to make sure she doesn't touch the tree. If she can't touch the tree, she won't even eat from the tree. It also shows the mistake of making too many restrictions. When you give too many restrictions, you run into trouble. The servant said to the woman, you're not going to die. God knows that as soon as you eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be just like God. You'll be a divine being who knows between good and bad. Now in the next sentence, when the woman saw that the tree was good for eating and a delight to the eyes, and the tree was desirable as a source of wisdom, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave some to her husband and he ate. Now look at the sentence. Chava, she looked at that fruit and she added something. She said, this looks like it's going to be a very tasty fruit. Ta'avahu la'inayim is very beautiful. And then she adds something new. And this tree is beautiful to make one wise. The Unkel's translation, the Aramaic translation, translated it as desirable to make one see. What was Eve looking for? She wasn't looking for a tasty fruit. There are all kinds of tasty fruits all over the garden. What was she looking for? Human curiosity. She wanted to know something. She didn't want to just be able to eat fruit. She wanted to answer the question, why? Why are we here? Why do we have these fruit? Why is God giving us these commandments? What am I doing in this garden? She wanted to know more. What happens if Eve didn't take from that tree of knowledge? Humanity would remain in a childless situation. If she didn't, the only reason we're human beings is because she ate from that tree. God bless Eve. If she didn't eat that from that tree, we'd all be primitives. Humanity could never have developed. So instead of being an original sin, it's actually an original act of defiance. A human being is saying, you know what? Daddy, I can get out of the crib myself. I want to know more. I don't want to be confined. I don't want to be a gorilla or a cow. I want to think. I want to know more. So Eve is a source of human curiosity and the source of wisdom. She was the one who did that. Then what happened? The Torah goes on. The eyes of both of them were opened, and they perceived that they were naked. And they sewed together fig leaves and made themselves loincloths. Naked? Who are they naked from? They were the only two human beings in the world. Who are they ashamed of? That cows are going to see them? That the trees are going to see them? That gorillas are going to see them? What are they ashamed of? Are they ashamed of each other? No. The Torah is saying something new has happened to the human beings. God said, don't eat from that tree of good and evil. So did they become philosophers afterwards? Do we have any great books of philosophy written by Adam or Eve? Do we have any great wisdom from them? What great knowledge did they get? The first knowledge that we find out that they got from eating this tree is that they're naked. This is great knowledge. We really needed to know that? Yes. What does it mean? A cow is not ashamed. A gorilla or a giraffe, they're not ashamed. Horses are not ashamed. They walk around without any clothes. No one asks any questions. Adam and Eve, even though there's no one to look at them, they felt a sense of shame. What does shame mean? There's a human consciousness, guilt, shame. This is a new invention. Before this moment, there was no shame. They walked around naked like animals, no problem. They ate from the tree and they suddenly were different from animals. We transitioned from being cavemen to being pre-human or post-human, just starting humanity that's conscious of itself. So then they heard the sound of the Lord God moving about in the garden at the breezy time of day, and the man and his wife hid from the Lord among the trees of the garden. Did they really think they could hide from God? I mean, they knew they couldn't hide from God, but they already start feeling guilt. They realized they broke the rules. They broke the house rules. Maybe in this, so quotation marks, God in his own way is proud of them. I'm glad you did this. Otherwise, the story would end here. We needed to have humanity that's conscious of itself and that's aware of itself. But God tries to tweak it a little bit. God called out, "Where are you?" Well, God knows darn well where they are. He's trying to get human beings to fess up. Adam replied, "I heard the sound of you in the garden. I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." God asked, "Who told you that you're naked? Did you eat from the tree that I have forbidden you to eat?" Of course, God knows that they did. So Adam, being very courageous, what does he say? "The woman you put at my side, she gave me the fruit. It's your fault, God. What'd you create this woman for? She's the one who gave it to me. I wouldn't have eaten it myself. You told me not to eat. I wouldn't have eaten it. It's your fault, God." Good. That's a human quality. You blame somebody else. Okay, God goes to the woman. And God said to the woman, "What is this you have done?" The woman replied, "The serpent made me do it. The serpent fooled me. And then I ate it." Again, really saying, it's your fault, God. Why did you put the serpent there? Why did God put the serpent there? He knew very, very well from the very beginning this is going to happen because he's God. He knows very well human beings are going to be tested because he's testing them. And he knows very well they're going to, quotation marks, fail the test by eating, and he wants them to eat it because if they don't eat it, humanity will never advance. And then he curses the snake. I'm not going to go into the snake's curse. That's another thing. Now let's look at the punishments that he gives. If you go down a little further, Elisha, he tells to the woman, "I will make most severe your pangs in childbearing. In pain shall you bear children. Your urge shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you." Now, what was the sin that Adam and Eve did? They ate the forbidden fruit. So if you're going to give a punishment, what punishment should you give? You're going to have trouble swallowing. You're going to have trouble digesting. The sin was eating something. What does God say? You're going to have difficulty in childbearing. How does this punishment relate to the sin? The answer is, it isn't a sin, and it isn't a punishment. It's a consequence. God, before, when a cow gives birth to a calf, it cowls, but that's what it does. It has a calf, and that's the end of it. That's the story. It's not conscious that I'm in danger, I might die, the calf might die. It's just a natural biological event. Now, what God is saying is, you ate from this tree of knowledge. You now have human consciousness. You know what you just learned? On the day that you eat from that tree, you shall surely die. Not that you'll die. You're going to suddenly be aware that you're mortal. There is such a thing as death. You could die. This is not just a simple game. So God tells the woman, as a consequence of your eating that fruit, you're not going to be like a cow who gives birth to a calf. You're going to be like a human woman. When she gives her birth, she's going to be in pain and she could be afraid she's going to die. She's going to be afraid that the child might not survive. It's going to be a difficult thing. You're going to be aware of your own mortality. That was what she learned. And then it says, your urge shall be for your husband, he shall rule over you. So some people, male chauvinists in particular, say, yeah, see, women have to be under the control of the man. It says right there in the Bible that Chava will be subject to her husband. So how do I interpret it? That It's related just to Adam and Eve. That's not a statement for all humanity, for all men and women for the end of time. Eve goofed, so to speak, and her role in the founding of humanity was she has to listen to Adam. Okay, but it's not directed for all humanity for all times. Then God comes to Adam. All right, so he says, because you did as your wife said, and you ate the tree about which I commanded you, don't eat it. Cursed be the ground because of you. By toil shall you eat it all the days of your life, but your food shall be the grasses of the field. Again, what's a punishment? It's not a punishment. God is saying, I'm not punishing you. I'm just giving you the consequence of what you did. Now that you're conscious of yourself as a human being, and you're not just a cow grazing in the fields, and not just an animal grazing through the Garden of Eden, where you could just pick any fruit you want to eat, you are a human being. And as a human being, not only could you die, but if you don't plant the field and you don't work hard, you're not going to have food to eat, you're going to die. It's now the responsibility is shifting. It's not just that nature's abundance is going to take care of you. You have to take care of yourself. You've eaten this tree of knowledge? Fine. Act with knowledge now. You're responsible. The sweat of your brow, workman's labor, isn't a curse. It's in fact simply a consequence of your behavior, the consequence of being a human being. Let's go back to those two trees. Then after that, what does it say right after that? It says, the man named his wife Eve, Chava, because she was the mother of all living. The word Chava is from Chaya, she gives birth to it. At the beginning, what did Adam call Eve? He called her Isha. Why is she called Isha? Because she was created from me. I'm Ish, she's Isha, we're co-partners, created out of the same material. Now suddenly, Eve changes. She's not just a woman, she's the mother of all humanity. Adam falls back and says, you know what? We learned a lesson. This Chava, by her eating this tree of knowledge, she put us in a new dimension. She's now not just another part of me, she is the mother of all of the progeny yet to come. She's really the mother of all humanity. Wow. So Chava, instead of being a minor partner in this event, is the singular partner who, by eating that tree from the tree of knowledge, gave humanity its consciousness, its awareness of shame, its awareness of guilt, its awareness of mortality. And she became the mother of all of the future. Now, after this happens, God, what does it say? And God made garments of skins for Adam and his wife. Well, it's problematic. Did God kill animals to make skins out of them? So some of our rabbis call it, he created light from ore with an olive instead of with an iron. Somehow God can manufacture whatever he wants. He manufactured clothing for them so they shouldn't feel naked. Okay. But then what does it say? Now that the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil, what if he should stretch out his hand and take from the tree of life and eat and live forever? What's God's fear of? God created these two trees, the tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They could have eaten from the tree of life all they wanted beforehand. He never commanded them not to eat from that tree. They could eat whatever they want, just the tree of knowledge they weren't allowed to eat. What do these two trees represent? The tree of life means I exist as a biological entity, like an animal not aware of mortality, not aware of anything. I just eat what's in front of me. I eat the grass on the field. I pluck an apple from the tree. I just simply plug along as on an animal level. No awareness of mortality. Tree of life means I live forever. It's not a question in my life. It's not a question to me. What's a tree of knowledge of good and evil? To live as a conscious human being, aware of mortality, aware that we are going to die if we don't work, aware that I need shelter, aware that I need to make clothing, awareness that I got to build a society, all these responsibilities that fall upon us all of a sudden, aware of guilt, aware of shame, all these things come into being. So God says, once these people have eaten from the tree of knowledge, I don't want them to eat this tree of life now, because I don't want them to regress. I don't want them to become animals again. They've transitioned from being cavemen to being real human beings. I don't want them to lose that. If they go back to the tree of life, they're going to go back into a stupor. I don't want them to go backwards. Once they've eaten from that tree of knowledge, They've graduated. They're now something new. That's the beginning of humanity as we know it. So what did God do? The God banished them from the Garden of Eden to till the soil from which he was taken. He reminds Adam, Adam, you were just taken from the soil. I created you out of the dust of the earth. You're a simple nothing. You're going to die again. You're going to live. You live, you're going to die. But in between that period of that you were born, you're created, and that you're going to die, you're responsible for yourself. You have work to do. And if you don't work properly, you're going to fail. You're going to die earlier, whatever the problem is. So God drove man out and stationed him east of the Garden of Eden. And the cherubim, these angels with fiery ever to guard him away from the tree of life. That's God's way of saying, I don't want you to go back. I don't want you to regress. I don't want you to become drug addicts. I don't want you to become alcoholics. I don't want you to run away from responsibility by putting yourself into a stupor. That's not what human beings are supposed to do. So a story that's often taught to us that Adam and Eve were sinners who defied God by eating the tree of knowledge of good and evil, in fact, is the story of the beginning of humanity as humanity was to develop. And God knew from the very beginning that's what's going to have to happen. And if Adam and Eve were too stupid, pardon the expression, too dull not to break the rules and eat the tree of knowledge themselves, God would have at some point commanded them to eat it. Doggone it, why are you taking so long? Just eat the tree already. We got to move things along. It's the transition period. And that's what the story is about. Let's remember, the Torah begins the story of the creation of the universe, right? There's a beautiful story, it's a magnificent description of the creation of the universe. Now the Torah shifts to the creation of humanity, not just to create the beginning of human beings, but the creation of humanity as thinking human beings, as responsible human beings, as rational human beings. God wanted this all to unfold just the way it did. God planted those trees on purpose, knowing full well that they were going to defy the formal rule. And when God said, on the day that you eat that tree, you're going to die, it means on the day that you eat the tree, you're going to understand what it means to be mortal. And that's really, that defines who we are. Once we know that we're mortal, that changes the whole picture of our lives. If we think we're going to live forever, our whole behavior is different. But since we're aware of the risk of life and the frailty of life, this colors our sense of responsibility and the sense of way we organize ourselves. So that's the story for today, folks. Next week, we're going to deal with Cain and Abel. Please, if you have any thoughts, comments, agreement, disagreement, happy to hear from everybody. Send it to mdangel@jewishideas.org. Have a wonderful day. Chazak, chazak. Be healthy and strong. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we're good.